Hello, what is the ARCH? The ARCH stands for ARLAR Research Group and was established in June 2021 as one of the ARLAR special interest groups. The vision of the ARCH is to lead collaborative rheumatology research in the Arab countries.
Our mission are based on four major pillars. First, conducting research projects. Second, supporting high-quality collaborative research among Arab countries. The third is motivating and assisting young researchers. Last, to connect with international rheumatology research teams. But what about our teams? Who are we? We are 16 voting members representing 16 ARLAR countries. We have been assigned by our society to represent our country in ARCH group.
The first axis of the ARCH is about project leadership. The ARCH will lead research projects in the ARLAR countries with the objective of serving the interests of the patients with rheumatic diseases. Any project corresponding to this team can be presented to the ARCH and will go through an internal standard operating procedure. Priority will be given to collaborations between multiple ARLAR countries. Also, the project needs to be in harmony with the ARCH's values: excellence, ethics and integrity, education, motivation, and teamwork.
The ARCH offers counseling for and supporting young Arab researchers who wish to conduct their own project. The ARCH will support researchers in research methodology, data management, and other services, including medical writing till publication.
The third axis of the ARCH is about educational activities. The ARCH will organize workshops to improve research skills among ARLAR members with a special focus on a young researcher. The workshops will be planned at the beginning of each year and target the general themes of research methodology, statistics, medical writing, and publication. We conducted a survey to identify the educational need of the rheumatologists in the Arab countries, and we have planned an exciting series of webinars with eminent speakers for the upcoming year.
We come into the fourth axis of ARCH, visibility and networking. We aim to connect all rheumatologists across the Arab world to conduct their researches, as well as link you to pharmaceutical companies who are actually running global trials. We are visible on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can find us on #ARCH_ARLAR. If you are interested and you would like our support in doing your research, please do not hesitate to contact us on the email address shown below.
On behalf of all the ARCH members, we are all looking forward to working with you on exciting research projects. Don't forget to follow the ARCH activities on social media following the #ARCHARLAR. Thank you.
I'm delighted to introduce Professor Maxime Dougados, who has been one of my mentors. Professor Maxime Dougados is emeritus professor from University Paris-Cité. He is full-time physician at the Department of Rheumatology at Cochin Hospital. He was the EULAR president from 2011 to 2013, the vice president of the ASAS Society, the chairman of the EULAR Standing Committee for Clinical Study, including therapeutic trials. He was also member of the French Society of Rheumatology, the ACR, and the executive board member of Osteoarthritis Research Society. And he was one of our honorary member at the Moroccan Society of Rheumatology. Professor Dougados, the floor is yours.
So thank you for the invitation to give this lecture, which is a little bit complicated for me because it's not. I know that you are aware of how to conduct a clinical study. I would like to thank also Isan for the kind introduction, but I assume she forgot to mention that probably you have invited me because I have a lot of experience of so-called international studies. And so the title is Risk and Benefit of an International Study. I am afraid I will repeat what we have heard in the introduction concerning the scope and the aims of the ARCH. And by the title, I think that we focus on the risk and benefit of an ARCH study. And for this, I will start right now. So which are the benefits and the risk of conducting for you an international study? That means a study within the Arabic country or within the member of ARLAR. And I will give you my experience as a French and an European, because I was a member of EULAR. The main benefit, I assume, is the visibility of your organization, the recognition of your organization, because you have conducted and published studies on behalf of your organization. That's a huge benefit. And all of us, at least at the European level, as an example, we consider that EULAR has been recognized as a big and important international society, mainly because of the EULAR recommendations. So, but I would like not to forget something which is very important as a benefit for me, the team spirit. In other words, as soon as you have run the first study, and if you have been successful, you have integrated people coming from different countries, people with the young people, the elderly people, or at least the mature people. So that's huge benefit. But at the same time, there are some risks, which are the mirror of the benefit. In terms of risk, the main risk is also, unfortunately, the visibility. And I will give you 3 examples. It's not a theoretical example. That is the example I am aware of. The first one is you accept a study, but you never start the study. As an example, again, potentially not so theoretical, you accept to translate a questionnaire in Arab language, but you never start. And then you stop the process. Or you start a study or a registry, you take the money, but you never complete, you never publish. Or your study is completed but of poor quality and immediately either rejected by the reviewer, but be aware that behind the reviewer, they will be aware of that, and there will be a lot of discussion concerning the risk. So if you take this into consideration, my advice will be that if you start, be sure that you will provide the results in terms of quality. And for this, I will go for two things. The study design, that is, which kind of study you can run in terms of difficulty and feasibility. So the study design, this is a quite complex slide, but it's starting on the top at the light pink color and going down to the dark pink color. And just to mention that the complexity of the running of this kind of study is coming from the top to the bottom. And you see, the first question says whether or not you will run a study with patients. Yes or no? If yes, you run a study with patients, you will have either one visit or more than one visit. One visit is called cross-sectional study. More than one visit is a longitudinal study. If it is a longitudinal study, whether you will have within the study an intervention and then control, and the maximum of complexity will be the cluster design. We will come back to that. So in terms of feasibility, never forget that do not reinvent the wheel and follow the standards of clinical research. And then we will see the question of the handling of the missing data and the question of the elaboration of the CRF. So first, the standards of clinical research. And if you consider a study without patients, so you can say, oh my God, what it is, a study, an international study without any patient. But this is a study. I give you three examples: the systematic literature research, recommendations from your society, or quality standards issued from your society. That is an international study because you will involve a steering committee, a scientific committee, fellows to perform the systematic literature research, and then you will have a publication. But never forget, follow what I call the standards of clinical research or the standardized operating procedures. Whatever you want to conduct, with whatever the study design, be aware that there are some standards. And I give you some examples concerning the SLR, the systematic literature research, the recommendations, and the quality standards. If you plan to run a study with patients, but with a single visit, that is a cross-sectional study. In fact, you will say, oh my God, it is less interesting than longitudinal study. But in fact, there are plenty of very interesting relevant questions you can answer with a cross-sectional study. I will give you three, I would say, personal experience of cross-sectional study. So the COMORA, which was comorbidities in rheumatoid arthritis, the COMOSPA, the same, but in spondyloarthritis, and the more recent one, PERSPA, the peripheral spondyloarthritis study under the umbrella of the Society ASAS. So within brackets, I would say that notice that for every time we are proposing a study, we are proposing an acronym of the study, and we are proposing a logo of the study we will use every time. And just to mention for the cross-sectional study, we take the example of COMORA. So COMORA, in fact, has been conducted in order to answer one specification, comorbidities in rheumatoid arthritis. Of course, there was one single publication summarizing the main results that has been published in Annals of Rheumatic Disease. But at the same time, and we will come back to that, because we have anticipated that beside the primary analysis, it will be possible to run ancillary analysis, that is other analysis. You see that we have got 14 other publications. So the cross-sectional study, for me, it's a good start for a society when they want to start in order with the main objective to have the recognition and the visibility. Now, if we want to run a longitudinal study, that's a huge gap between the cross-sectional and the longitudinal. Because in the longitudinal, you will face the problem of the missing data of the people who have been included but never follow. So it's really an important difference between cross-sectional and longitudinal. And then you see for the longitudinal whether you want to have a no intervention. So how to run a study longitudinal with no intervention. That's a cohort. In a cohort of patients, you follow the patient. For example, Espoir in France with in early rheumatoid arthritis patient, or Desir in early spondyloarthritis, but there is no intervention. We follow the patient with a specific symptom or sign. And then if there is an intervention, it's more complicated. The registries are the less complicated because you do not treat the patient, you collect the information from patients who have been treated by their treating rheumatologist. You do not interfere, you see. Otherwise, there are also possibilities and more complicated to run a study with an intervention and such as a new drug, and that's usually due to the pharma company. Usually the international scientific society are more interested on either, I would say, common drugs, such as corticosteroids, methotrexate, or non-pharmacological treatment. But for the non-pharmacological treatment, it's even more complicated because I don't have time to go into the details, but you need to have two groups, but the control group, the patient enrolled in the control group should not be, I would say, contaminated by the patients enrolled in the active group. Imagine, I take the example of the TICOSPA trial, that is tight control. We have compared two groups of patients in the TICOSPA trial. Patients followed by their treating rheumatologist, what we call the usual care, the control group, usual care. They do what they want, but we are collecting information every 3 months. The other group, the active, is a tight control group. And for this group, we explain to the rheumatologist in this group, you have to treat this patient according to the ASAS-ULA recommendation, that is, take the information concerning the ASDAS every month, and if the ASDAS is above 2.1, you need to think as an intensification of the treatment. So that's a two group. But if you do this as a conventional trial, that is in the same center for the same investigator, you will have in the waiting room at his office, patient enrolled as a control or patient enrolled as a tight control. And that is what I call the potential contamination. In order to avoid that, you do not randomize the patients, but you randomize the centers. That is, you ask the investigator whether they accept to be randomized, and they will be randomized either to treat patient according to the usual care or to treat patient according to a tight control. By doing that, in fact, you are running two separate trials. That means two investigators meeting, two ECRF, and two finally, and two ways to follow themselves. So that's the most complicated for me. Now, there is a question, in particular, if you are running a longitudinal study, the question of the missing data. That's very important for the quality of the study and the visibility. The most important for me is not the treatment of the missing data, it's a prevention of missing data. So how to prevent missing data in a cross-sectional study? First, you should select appropriately the investigator, selection of the patients. Usually, nowadays, we are using not a paper CRF, but eCRF. The advantage of the electronic CRF is that it's possible to have mandatory information. As an example, you want to know the gender of the patient, and if there is no answer, it's impossible to continue to enter information context patient. That is what I call mandatory information, or automatic queries. As an example, you see that you have a mail, and then a few pages later, you have breast cancer. And then you have a breast cancer in a male or a prostate cancer in a female. Or you have a weight of more than 300 kilograms. That is what I call automatic queries. But for longitudinal studies, which is again more and more complicated than the cross-sectional study, my advice is that despite the fact that, of course, in the eCRF, it is not possible to have a clear identification of the patient. However, in each center, you should ask the investigator to clearly identify the patient they have involved. The name, the address, the phone, the email. And as an example, in the DESIR cohort, we have also the name, the address, the phone, the email, not only of the patient, but also of the husband or the children or the general practitioners. Newsletter for patient in order to maintain the patient in the cohort or the trial. Birthday card to the patient. I give you the example we have used in Espoir cohort, in the DESIR cohort. Anticipation of the date of the next visit. That is, as soon as you are complete the baseline visit, you are asking in the eCRF, give us the date of the next visit. You have to put a reminder of the visit, and you should have anticipate what we call a SOP, a standardized operating procedure, in case of no-show at a specific visit. Otherwise, you will have to, what I call, treat the missing data. Never forget that missing data handling means to make information that does not exist. But making information that does not exist is cheating in clinical research, and cheating is wrong. So, nevertheless, there are plenty of possibilities how to treat, and you will have persons who are well aware of different methodologies that you can use as an example, last observation carried forward, baseline observation carried forward, extrapolation, non-responder imputation. You give the value of the median of the group, you give the value of the mode of the group, you take the best scenario, the worst scenario, the completer. There are plenty of possibilities. And with the pro and the con in favor of this one or this one. And usually in 2024, the so-called Graal, the best of the best, will be the multiple imputation, but be careful of the multiple imputation when you have a lot of missing data. So concerning the missing data, for me, the take-home message will be missing data are reality in clinical research. Reality means it's impossible to run a study without missing data. All the reviewers are well aware of that. But missing data handling, that is the treatment, is hazardous, whatever the technique you use. This is the reason why missing data should be anticipated and prevented. So for me, you need to have a specific section in the protocol. How do you anticipate to prevent the missing data? And you need to have a specific section in the statistical analysis plan, how you will handle the missing data. And you have also a specific section in the published manuscript. The first take-home message, the specific section in the protocol is very important, in particular, when you are applying for a research grant. Because usually the reviewer evaluating the research grants are well aware of this question. Feasibility, and I give you the example of the elaboration of the case report form. The most important for me is that this is the responsibility of the principal investigator. This is not the responsibility of the CRO, that is the clinical research organization. This is the responsibility of the principal investigator. The question is that you need, in order to elaborate a CRF, you need to have a clear idea of how you will present the CRF what you will do with the data, which kind of potential different analysis. So in fact, the ECRF, the elaboration, in fact, is the most important, but also the most difficult and the most challenging. I will give you two examples. I don't know, whoa, this is a very busy slide. I took this slide on the SAS PERSPA study, but just to give you some example of the presentation of some minor items. So it has been decided for the PERSPA study that the smoking status will be important to collect. Of course, but how to collect the smoking status? There are several possibilities. So there is no black and white answer, but you need to sit down and to think in which way I will collect this information. And here on this slide, which is quite busy, there is information coming the smoking status, alcohol intake, the level of education, and the marital status. And so depending in which country, you will see, because in your country, it's quite clear as an example, educational level. At the international, it's more complicated to be sure that the people will understand. In the SAS PERSPA study, I made the mistake as an example for the semiology hip pain in spondyloarthritis. Hip pain and hip involvement. I put hip involvement, yes, no. But in fact, we have realized that the people have not understood hip involvement as, for me, it was coccytis. That for me, it was an involvement of the hip and the joint, but not the tendons around the hip. I am not sure that the people have understood this the same way. Another example is the SAS classification criteria. Here on this slide, you see all the items of the SAS classification criteria. So very challenging, and you need to sit down, not only one person, but several persons in order to elaborate this. Now, from a pragmatic point of view, we have seen the question of the missing data handling. We have seen the question of the case report form. But there are also other questions when you are running an international study. And we will start by the, if I succeed to change. Whoop. Oh, do you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes?
Mhm.
Okay, so and if we come back here. Concerning the organization, I would advise, based on my experience on this one, to have 4 different bodies. The first one, of course, is the principal investigator. You notice that there is no S, it's one single person. And this person is responsible for everything. The second thing is a scientific committee. And of course, the principal investigator can be a member of the scientific committee, but the scientific committee should work on his as a scientific committee with the president. And as an example, in the DESIR cohort, we have a president of the scientific committee running for 2 years, and we are changing the president of the scientific committee and the scientific committee member. The steering committee, nothing is done without an acceptation and without discussion within the steering committee. For example, do we give which CRO will be in charge of the ECRF, which investigators, which member of the scientific committee. That's the work of the steering committee and the investigators, of course. The financial management, again, has to be clear from the beginning that the recipient, that is the one who will receive the money, is asking for the money to a supervisor, but the supervisor is not giving back the money to the recipient. The supervisor is deciding a yes or no answer, and the payer gives to the recipient. And obviously, every month, every 6 months, every year, all these people, the way the money has been managed is reported to the steering committee with a very, very transparent way. Access to the database. So what does it mean? It means that you need to anticipate the possibility to any participant or even any researcher all around the world to have access to the database in order to run his or her own analysis. In other words, for example, in the different studies I have shown you, I have run, we consider ourselves as data collector. And of course, if we are interested as a scientist, we can analyze the data. But otherwise, the database is available for any researcher. So usually the main analysis is performed by the people, steering committee, the scientific committee, the investigators, and the principal investigator. At Variance, the ancillary analysis, anyone can apply as soon as the database is available. But for this, you need to have, again, standardized operating procedures. You need to have a template that is anyone can submit a scientific project. This scientific project is submitted to the scientific committee. And if it is accepted, usually the scientific committee is nominating a mentor within the scientific committee to follow. Okay? Either you provide or not the database to the one who is applying. That, in other words, either it is a statistician who has performed the main analysis, who is able to perform the ancillary analysis, or you give the database to the researcher. And then you have the question of the publication policy. Everything as the other item, anticipation is the best way. It has to be clearly written, and usually the main analysis, the principal investigator is in charge of this, and is the primary author of this. Completely different from the ancillary analysis. Usually the ranking order of the authors is under the responsibility of the first author. That is either the principal investigator for the main analysis or the one who has applied for the ancillary analysis. It has to be clear what should be the role of the mentor. And then for me, something concerning the visibility, whether you should ask that the acronym of the study should appear in the title or in the abstract. And if you go to PubMed, for example, if you check Désir or Espoir, you will find all the publications from Désir or Espoir. And you also need to prepare in advance the acknowledgement section, because usually, in particular for the ancillary analysis, the fellow who is in charge of the statistical analysis of the ancillary analysis is not aware of all what we have discussed, in particular, the role of the scientific committee, the steering committee, and the investigator, and all of them have to be acknowledged. So that will be my last slide. It seems that it was a little bit, in fact, if you go back to my personal experience, I made a lot of mistakes and I had a lot of failure, and I failed very frequently. But never forget that after the failure, you will see the success. And just to mention what Nelson Mandela said, a winner is just a dreamer who never gave in. Thank you for attention, and ready for discussion now.
Thank you, Professor Douglas, for sharing your impressive experience and highlighting the benefits and risk of international scientific study. Now we will open the floor for discussion, and we invite our attendees to share their questions and experience in conducting international scientific study in rheumatology. While waiting questions from the audience, Professor Dogodos, I want to ask you or to start the questions about your opinion as we are within the era of AI, about the strengths, opportunities, and the threats of AI in conducting international scientific study.
What do you mean by AI?
Artificial intelligence.
What would be the role of artificial? I have no experience at all. I have some experience of artificial intelligence in the field of medicine,
Yes.
but I have no experience at all of artificial intelligence when running a study. But I am very old. My personal opinion is that the human experience is much more important than the computer. And for me, it is essential when running an international study to have an and to put money in the
Yes.
presential investigator meeting, not video conference.
Yes.
Investigators meeting before running the study and at the end for the presentation of the result. So that's sometimes it's a lot of money, but it's for me,
Yes.
if you keep in mind what is the benefit of an international study under the umbrella of a specific organization, you will increase dramatically the visibility and you will increase dramatically the team spirit by organizing this non-artificial intelligence meeting. But I am not sure I have answered adequately the question.
Thank you, Professor.
I have another question from the audience. It's about the missing data and how does missing data affect the reality of the research?
You know that it's very complicated. There are plenty of discussion by the statistician concerning what is the best way to do that. There is a thumb rule usually that is if you exceed 20% of missing data, it's becoming very, very hazardous. Otherwise, below 20%, there are plenty of possibility, and usually, as I've mentioned, currently it's fashionable, I would say, when you want to, in particular, when you want to publish some data, to refer to the concept of the multiple imputation.
Another question to Professor Dogodos. Considering varying regulations and practices worldwide, how issues related to data privacy and security can be addressed?
I'm not sure I have well understand the question.
Okay, regarding the varying regulations and practices between different countries.
The regulation.
Yes.
My God. I give you my last personal experience with ASAS-PERSPA in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Pedro Machado, our colleague in London, agreed to participate as an English representative. And then he was in charge of solving the administrative issues. He did it.
Mm-hmm.
But as the day he got the authorization to run the study in England, the study was over because all the other people around the world have enrolled the patient and we have stopped them. So when you look at the ASAS-PERSPA publication, there is not a single person from England, mainly due to legal issues. Usually what we are doing in this international study, that is the principal investigator, is say, okay, for each individual country, we nominate one principal investigator. That is what we call the national principal investigator. And we say to the national principal investigator, you need to declare on your honor that you will conduct the study in your country according to the legal restriction in your country, because it's impossible to check whether in Iraq or in Morocco or in Algeria or in Egypt for a principal investigator to check whether or not you have conducted your study in accordance with your national regulation. But we are asking the national principal investigator to sign a paper and say, okay, we do. The single thing we are requiring is an ethical committee acceptation, but not the other regulation. But at least whatever the country you are running a study, usually you need to have an ethical committee approval.
Okay. Thank you, Professor.
I have a tricky question from our audience. It's about authorship. And how do you manage the authorship lists if you have too many investigators, for example, more than 20 who included patients? If you exclude some investigators from authorship, would that affect their motivation to participate in future study? If they could not reach the minimal number to include, if that's is it feasible or not? So what's your thoughts and your advice?
My personal
Yes.
is that you, in order to be an co-author of any scientific manuscript, you should follow the recommendation of Vancouver.
Mhm.
If you are an investigator, if you are a collector, if you are someone who is enrolling patients and collecting data, there is no place to be a co-author of any scientific manuscript. That's a rule, usually. But I am well aware that other people, they want to be co-author. So you need to balance between the two. And you need to be very strong, because usually above 20 co-author, it doesn't mean nothing. But it's possible. So I give you some example. In the Assas per study, we have mentioned only the national principal investigator. But the most important is the transparency and the anticipation. From scratch, we explain to the people, even you will ask in your country to 10 or 20 other rheumatologists to enroll patients, be aware that at the end, there will be only one person from your country to be part of the list of co-authors. Honestly, we accept that, but it is not acceptable. And again, the ones who are co-authors have to be either they have been involved in the study design, in the scientific question, the data analysis, and the writing of the manuscript as well. But anyway, it's a very complicated question. I am not sure it interferes a lot with the question of the participation. But as soon as you will have some visibility, such as, for example, it is a EULAR initiative, usually the people accept the Assas initiative. I have plenty of experience. We have never. What you can do in the acknowledgement section, which is different than the list of co-authors, in the acknowledgement section, you can mention all the people. But for the ancillary analysis,
it's open.
Our role is a task of the one, the head of the project. It's his or her responsibility.
Okay. Another question is from Bawan Ahmed. He's asking about how can transparency and integrity be maintained when conducting and reporting clinical research in an international environment. As a clinical evidence, I have come across numerous studies from the INT'L region not meeting minimum standards and failing the domains of risk of bias. Your opinion, Professor?
The minimum of, I have not understood whether you are speaking about integrity.
Minimum standards and failing the domains of risk of bias.
Standards of care or treating a patient?
Yes.
A minimum standard of care or treating a patient?
And failing the domain of risk of bias. He's asking about the bias.
In the reporting of clinical research.
I don't see what you mean. In the report of clinical research, the question of the difference in the standard of care of patients? I do not see, because I try to
He's asking mainly about the transparency in interpreting data between countries. Yes.
To transfer the data between countries. Oh my God. Yeah. The solution is don't ask the question.
Okay.
No, in other words, if you run an internal study with one single eCRF, which is available on the web, usually there is no question. You enter your data for your patient, you have accepted. So whether you are in Latin America, in Europe, or in North Africa, or you enter the data. I have never faced a question. The opposite. As soon as you have the database, and if you want to transfer the database to another country, that's more complicated. And currently, I am facing this problem if the sponsor, from an administrative point of view, is my hospital. They refuse to transfer the database to another country, in particular, even in a European country. So in the non-European countries, it's even more complicated. But it's possible to send it. So there are two ways. The time you are entering the information from your patient in your center, in the ECRF, and at the end, when you have the database and you want to provide the database to a researcher in order to perform his own ancillary analysis in his own country. So I am aware that sometimes it's not difficult, but I have also to admit that sometimes I have decided something which was in contradiction with the French regulation. Okay. But from a scientific point of view, I consider that it was more important. And as an example, the DESIR database has been transferred in the US, in Africa, in Latin America, everywhere. So at the end, we are more than 110 publications, coming from these different continents.
Okay, thank you.
Another question about the medical writing and reporting. Also, how could we enhance the reporting of clinical research in our region, as referring to consult guidelines or the risk of bias for Cochrane risk of bias? How could we deal it when we are in an international environment, which is come to make them adhere to this reference in the reporting and in the writing of the article?
In the report, writing an article is writing an article. That is, in other words, if you follow the scientific, the question is that there are some professionals of writing articles. So we know, as an example, personally, I have published more than 1,000. I have 1,000 publications. But I tell you, the people are not aware of that. I have reviewed more than 2,000 manuscripts in my life. So I know exactly where the people are making the mistakes, and I know exactly how to detect. But if you follow the rules of the reporting of there is no issue. There is no specificity of an international study. It's the same as a national thing. The last sentence of the introduction should introduce the objective. The results section should be the mirror of the method section. Nothing can appear in the results section without explaining this in the method section. And all the different items of the method section should appear in the results section. I don't know whether I am clear, but that's the most important. Discussion, usually it's easy. Discussion, the mistakes for the studies are usually coming from the method and results section. Discussion, usually you start with the take-home message, you continue by the pro and the weakness and the strength, and you never end by a section called conclusion. In conclusion, you cannot conclude. It's too arrogant. You're in summary, and you are only given a piece of the cake and not everything. So you should end your manuscript by open questions. This data should be confirmed in other study or something like that. But otherwise, there is nothing specific to an international study.
And maybe also in this writing part, do you advise to to separate the different parts, that each of the participants writes one part, of the principal investigator writes all the manuscripts, and then the manuscript was reviewed by all the co-authors. What could be the most efficient way to write it?
For me, the most efficient is that the first author write everything. Even usually starting with bullets. You understand bullets? That is introduction. There is no sentence, but the 8 bullet points, the 8 ideas you want to mention. Methods and results are more present in detail, and discussion also bullets, because you can ask the other people. The 3 people are very important. The one will be the first author, the last author, and the statistician. Usually the statistician is the second or third. The first author is the one who is writing method, result. The senior author, the last author, is the one who usually finalizing the introduction and discussion. You see yeah, because the first author sometimes is a fellow, is the young guy who has done a lot of work for this particular manuscript. If it is the same, he has to do everything. But usually the senior author is more usually is more focused on the introduction and discussion, and the young one, the active one, the jobbing one, I would say, methods and results, and references.
Professor Douglas, I have an open question, actually. From your experience, what are the unmet needs in improving rheumatological research capacity, and how to improve it? Especially in our region, there are multiple logistic issues related to the funding constraints and to the infrastructure absence. So what's your opinion on how to improve these issues?
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, the question is how to improve what is the unmet need in order to run international studies because of the differences of the structure. So first, I will say, do not take the excuse of the lack of structure to run clinical studies. That's a bad excuse. Everyone, everywhere in the world can run clinical study of high quality. But for this, it depends on the research question. This is the reason I have presented all the different study design. Personally, my recommendation is, honestly, the best way is to run cross-sectional study with one single visit, but you can answer plenty of questions for that. You don't need a specific structure. Of course, you need someone, but you have in your environment people who have a lot of experience in running studies, choosing the best CRO, elaborating on ECRF. So for this, you need to have 2, 3, 4 persons. But you need to include also young people from different countries in order that they will be aware of how to elaborate ECRF. It seems very simple. It's very complicated. So you need a very small group of people in charge of the feasibility, such as the elaboration of the ECRF, the choice of the CRO. But otherwise, a lot of people can run the study. Look at the Comora, Comospa. There are plenty of people all around the world, and they have done that very well. It's more complicated because the people usually immediately they think of the most complicated, the cluster design trial, the evaluation of non-pharmacological treatment. It seems very simple. It's even more complicated than to run a placebo-controlled trial using a drug by a pharma company. But if you want to convince the pharma companies to come in your country to enroll investigators in your country, you need to increase your visibility. And then you need to run other studies, such as cross-sectional studies, registries, cohorts of patients. And if you do that, immediately they will come and then you will run therapeutical trials. And then after that, you will run non-pharmacological trials. Physiotherapy. I give the example of the title, the T2T trial. It's very complicated.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if you have, yes, maybe one last question. Again, the authorship question. In the case of you have a lot of co-authors, what are your criteria for ranking them?
Ranking them?
Yeah, except
Again,
for the first one.
honestly, either you are the first or the second or the last. After that, by alphabetic order.
Yeah.
Or the people say, if you want to include at the list of co-authors the investigators, we did nothing in terms of study design, nothing in terms of elaboration of the CRF, nothing in terms of analysis, nothing in terms of writing the manuscript. Okay, it's a gift for them, you give them, but usually the people say, okay, you will include them with a ranking order in relation to the number of patients they have enrolled in the trial. Okay, but this is not a scientific approach again.
Of course.
Okay? And it is not it is not fulfilling the Vancouver recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
But I am aware of that, but it's not so. It's better to stimulate these people, say, you are an investigator. Oh my God, you are allowed, you will have the priority to apply for an ancillary study. And in this case, you will be the first author. So you need to have an idea and research. And then if you have not the infrastructure in your region, in your country, in your department, why not to ask if your research question is relevant? Why not to ask the collaboration of a member of the steering committee or the statistician of the steering committee, and then and then you will be the first author. Mm-hmm. But you need to have a research question. Sometimes there are plenty of research questions. When you are, whatever the study you are running, there is a lot of possibility. And again, with the Espoir cohort, we have more than 120 publications. In the Desir cohort, 110 publications. Comora, 14 publications. Comospa, I don't remember the name. Assas Perspa, we are approaching more than 20 publications, and it's continuing. Yeah. But you need to have an idea. Mm-hmm. That's the most important, and the idea that you need to have a question, a research question. After that, it's easy. It's more complicated to have ideas.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dogotas. For the sake of time and before ending this fruitful discussion, Professor, would you like to give any advice for the junior researcher?
No.
Okay.
I don't want to give any advice. I would like to give an advice to the senior researcher. Mm-hmm. Never run an international study without inviting young colleagues within the scientific committee or within the steering committee. Of course, for this one particular study, potentially will not be of benefit for you, but it will be of benefit for your society for the future. So the most important are not the young, the most important are the senior. They have to enroll young colleagues in the steering committee and the scientific committee. And then they will see the main analysis, the ancillary analysis, and then they will have idea, and then they will run their own analysis.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Dogotas.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this great talk, and we will be happy to invite you again in another section of the ARCH webinar if you accept.
It will be a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.